Before I start, I would just like to give a little introduction. I was advised to give a little overview of hydrofracking for folks that may not be too familiar with it, although most people here probably are, but just a very brief couple of words. It's a process that some people in Pennsylvania have referred to as an invasion of trucks coming into their area to begin a process that not only includes fracking, but includes the whole array of different processes that have to lead up to the fracking, which is the breaking of the shale, and that includes the deforestation of certain areas that are used for the well pads, the construction of the drilling rigs, the drilling itself, and then the shipping in of vast quantities of water and chemicals to be put under pressure to then break up the shale, which then releases small pockets of gas encapsulated in the shale for use at a later time. What I'd like to briefly talk about today is the aspect of the water necessary. For each drilling process, there are millions of gallons of water per frac. An individual well can be fracked many times. Recently, in our state legislature, there was a water withdrawal bill that helps to facilitate this, and the group that I'm with, Coalition to Protect New York, lobbied very hard against this particular bill because it has a loophole of 100,000 gallons, which is the top limit that may be taken out from streams, rivers, and lakes in the area or in our state to be used in the hydrofracking process. Anything over the 100,000 gallons will have to be permitted by the state. And the thing that we disagreed about with this particular legislation is that because there was no permitting below 1,000 gallons and it was given to any particular entity to withdraw that good amount of water, in a sense it gives away fresh water of our state to the fracking industry, because they could then segment their delivery to various haulers and then get as much water as they needed. And if we look at the total amounts of water, some calculations are in the trillions. There are estimated for New York State approximately 80,000 pads that could come into the state, and with a total of 6.6 trillion gallons of use that will go out of the water cycle permanently, mixed with the chemicals used to frack. And some of that comes back up, as they call produced water, and that is again, it's a question of what can be used. It'll be gone into detail later. So this is the aspect of water withdrawal part of the picture, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
And among the many topics that can be discussed about hydrofracking, I would like to limit mine to the traffic that is involved. There's a handout that was provided, I guess, through the National Park Service, which indicates that any one single well will create in one-way traffic about 1,355 truckloads just coming in to bring the materials, to bring water, to bring cement, to bring pipelines, et cetera, but naturally these trucks also leave again. Okay? I have read numerous other studies where they indicate that per well the traffic might easily be 3,000 truckloads for one single well, and as this gentleman just pointed out, one single well may be drilled more than once over its lifetime. Okay? So if you can imagine that kind of traffic coming to our community, let's say if it's only, let's say roughly 2,000 truckloads just coming in and then going out for one single well, and any one pad has maybe 20 wells on it, and then there are numerous pads obviously here. I think the impact on our community is absolutely horrific, not only in the destruction of the roads, but also the noise pollution and the air pollution and the traffic jams that we get, not to speak of the accidents that we most likely are going to have. And the beneficiaries of the fracking will be the people who are going to lease their land, but all the rest of us, I think, are going to bear all the burdens through our tax money. And I think we should not have to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you very much for everyone for being here, because it's very important we all work together. Thank you. This is how fracking actually interferes with our economy. I have a list here of how gas drilling affects property values, credit unions, and banks. I have an in-house memo from Wells Fargo Bank stating the gas lease properties, they will not mortgage, loan, lease to anyone who's trying to sell those properties. And this includes properties adjoining those properties. So if your property adjoins anyone's property that's been leased, you will not be able to sell your property. I'll be providing this evidence to the board, okay? This also includes from HUD as well. HUD has stipulations that within a certain amount of footages, they will not accept properties, slush pits, or heavy traffic impacts, whether HUD will also fund mortgages. Federal credit unions are also getting in on this, and this is also affecting people's insurances as well. Insurances are either dropping house policies or increasing their premiums. This also affects the title insurance as well. Everyone's, I'm sure, has been seeing this on the New York Times. So here is, I'm trying to be quick for everyone. Someone to present this documentation for the board.
I'd like to follow up on the truck traffic. 80,000 pounds, that's what a tractor trailer weighs. That's the maximum gross vehicle weight for a tractor trailer in New York State. I'd like to also give you a little compare and contrast. On the 20th of this past month, a friend of mine and myself, a couple of friends and myself, actually kind of staked out an intersection here in the town. The intersection of Route 233 and College Road, right at the bottom of the hill where the flashing light is. That intersection and Route 233 has become kind of a thoroughfare for truck traffic. The years that I've lived in this community, many people have complained that live in the village about the truck traffic that comes through the village all the time. From 12B to Route 5, 233 becomes a perfect cut-through where you don't have to bother coming through the village. That works if you're going west, if you're going to Rome, or if you're going out towards Syracuse on Route 5. But if you're going north or east, truck traffic will eventually come through the village. So the compare and contrast. For a 24-hour period, on the 20th of this month, we sat and counted 4 and 5 axle vehicles. These are concrete trucks, the 10-wheel dump truck that you see coming down the roads, 5-axle vehicles, which are tank trailers, tractor trailers, lowboys, flatbeds, anything that is a split tractor-trailer combination. And in that 24-hour period, we counted 78 trucks. There was somebody on that intersection for 24 hours. Not much activity during the middle of the night. But 78 trucks, that's the compare. This is the contrast. From the same document, approximately 1,355 trucks to build a frack city, wherever it's going to be. That traffic will be coming through here. That's for one well. Now, as this process continues, the last page of the document, by the way, there's a host of documentation on this back table. I would suggest anybody that would like to, please help themselves to it. But on the last page, this will give you an idea of where we are today and where we could be somewhere down the road. In the county that is directly below us here, but directly below Chemung County, which is Bradford County in Pennsylvania. They started in 2008 in July with 48 wells. April of this year, almost a 3-year time span. To this day, there are 1,666 wells in Bradford County right now. So in that 3-year time span, they've gone from 48 to 1,600 plus. This is a constant flow. It is a cavalcade. It's like putting a city up on our private lands. So I would like you to understand that once this starts, it doesn't stop. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week until it's finished, but it never finishes. So I want to thank you for your time, your attention, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. Yep.
When Spring Farm Cares wanted to erect windmills, it took us 2.5 years, including a year-long moratorium to get this past the Town of Kirkland. You would have thought that we were asking to install a nuclear reactor. Yet each and every horizontal hydrofracking well sunk will be just as dangerous and disastrous to its surrounding area as a nuclear power plant. Immediately dangerous and disastrous, not just potentially dangerous, even including radioactivity. Levels of radioactivity in the holding lagoons of some wells have measured at hundreds of times the permissible levels of radiation for human exposure. Yet governments, federal, state, and local are seriously considering opening the door and inviting the devil of horizontal fracking in. Our state and local governments need to totally ban horizontal hydrofracking as it is currently practiced until the 2005 law, pushed through by Dick Cheney, which exempts Halliburton from the need to reveal what chemicals are in hydrofracking fluid, has been rescinded until there has been full public disclosure as to the deadly threat to our water, our air, our health, our environment, and our finances. Some clever people, even though the hydrofracking fluid is a secret, figured out that if you truckers have to have a manifest of what they're carrying, so they checked with the truckers and they found out what they're carrying. So they learned what some of the stuff in this hydrofracking fluid. And it's stuff that causes cancer, leukemia, nervous disorders, impairment of hearing, speaking, and seeing, bone marrow diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, liver and kidney disease, and asthma, to name a few. Fracking fluid has shown up in water supplies 27 miles from the nearest well. Additionally, there will be thousands of trucks transporting this poison. In Rome, just last week, according to EOD, a truck carrying fracking fluid spilled some of its load, luckily just a few gallons. Had a whole truckload spilled, Rome's water supply would have been in trouble. With thousands of trucks carrying this stuff, major spills are inevitable. And leaves not forget the thousands of miles of new access roads and land scouring pipelines to be built, your land confiscated by eminent domain. Very importantly, additionally, in 2005, New York State passed a compulsory integration law. If one of your neighbors allows fracking and your property is included in the spacing unit decided upon by the frackers, you are legally, by what amounts to extortion, made to allow them to tunnel under and frack your property, your water supply be damned. This law not only negates property rights, it thumbs its nose at township boundaries. Our only protection is that frackers must show that they own or have at least 60% of the spacing unit. If they can't drill. So don't let them talk you into anything, just say no. Neighbors and municipal governments must work together to stop a juggernaut that will turn our beautiful home that we have worked so hard to preserve into a poisoned industrial landscape. In the meantime, our municipal governments will be ruined. You will be ruined. Every municipal government will be ruined, because Albany is providing no funding for the roads that will be torn up or any of the infrastructure that is going to be destroyed by the hundreds of thousands of trucks rolling 24 hours a day, bringing the fracking fluid and sand and the millions of gallons of fresh water. Where are they going to get that from? And then carting poisoned water away to holding lagoons shrouded in asthma-producing pollution, and then to overburdened municipal water treatment plants, and you can't take radioactivity out of water. There will be toxic cleanups galore. Right now in Utica, we see that millions of dollars will be required to clean up just a few brownfields. Multiply this by hundreds, even thousands. What of health costs for those sickened by the poisons? And New York State is dumping all of these costs onto the towns, the villages, and the cities, and onto us taxpayers, while leaving the policing of it all to the DEC, whose department for that policing currently employs 19 people. Lots of luck with that. Fracking is a nightmare for the populace and a catastrophe for local governments. We need to stop this right now, bombard state and federal politicians, and as for town governments, I urge a moratorium that can be renewed indefinitely. And since compulsory integration makes a mockery of township boundaries, I urge this board to work with adjoining townships to put together a unified ban on horizontal hydrofracking as it now stands. Thank you.
As you can imagine, all these effects will have unintended economic effects all over the state. There have been a number of food co-ops, groceries, things that buy locally. They want to buy from New York State, and their purchasers have looked at hydrofracking coming and let them know that they do not want food that comes from areas with contaminated water, with contaminated ground, with contaminated air. So, this will be another unintended economic consequence. And just a few figures about this. These figures were put together by John Schwartz, Professor Emeritus of Physics of Ithaca College. The potential economic gain from gas extraction for 1 year was put at $1.1 billion. The actual annual economic gain from tourism, which will also be very heavily impacted. Now, just in the Marcellus Shale region is $8.7 billion. For grapes and wine growing, which again, I mean, the point of the New York State wine industry is because we've got great water. Again, just in the Marcellus Shale region is $3.4 billion. Farming, $3.65 billion. Dairy, $1.95 billion. So any one of these is way above the economic gain of hydrofracking. And put all together, there's huge economic benefit for things as they are, for all these agricultural and tourism uses. Whereas, hydrofracking, if it pans out the way it looks like it will, all of these would be, gone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I come here today because I'm concerned, as some of the other people have pointed out, that this doesn't stay within the boundaries of Clinton. So New Hartford has passed a 6-month moratorium on hydrofracking within the town, and I hope that your town will do the same and form an alliance with them. The trucks that bring the water in, they say that it's going to be 5.5 million gallons of water per well site, and when they drill down vertically, each well pad can have anywhere from 8 to 24 horizontals. And so that would be 4.4 million gallons of water per well pad. A tanker truck carries 8,000 gallons of water, so that would be about 5,500 trucks bringing the water. So that's a big concern. In Colorado, their air quality went from a good air quality to having smog, the likes of Los Angeles, what they have there. There's going to be another movie showing at the Uptown Theater on the 22nd, Water Isn't Water Anymore. It's another film about the topic of hydrofracking for people who are interested. And recently there was an event in Ithaca where they had 45 speakers. A friend of mine attended the event, and at the event they're telling about the workers who work for the gas companies, and it's when they work for the gas company, they're not allowed to see their own doctor. You have to see a company physician. And unless it's a life or death situation, and it was a life or death situation for one person who had a chemical spill, and when he went in, the nurse was talking to him to ask him what had happened, and she got renal failure just from the chemicals that were on him. So there is not disclosure of what's happening, and I think that this definitely needs to be stopped, at least until we can understand what's in it, what's in the fracking fluids, and until they're made to follow the laws like the Superfund laws, the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, and things like that. And I actually don't think that there's a need for this, and that it is just a money-making scheme for the few, and the burden is going to be put on the rest of us. Thank you.
I'm going to assume that a lot of this about hydraulic fracturing, you already know. You know that it's a very heavy industrialized process, that this will change our landscape forever. We've already mentioned the traffic, around-the-clock noise from compressor stations, and this is going to happen for decades to come. We're going to be living with a landscape that has been scarred by drilling rigs, huge tanks, wellheads, compressor stations, and pipelines. We're going to be breathing toxic air for decades to come. We're going to be leaving all the future generations millions of gallons of brine and toxic chemicals deep within the earth, only to present themselves in the future in ways not even yet imagined. After the gas is sold and profits are made, what are we going to have to live with? We've already mentioned property values, a very deep concern. The town of New Hartford, as you know, already has imposed a 6-month moratorium on hydrofracking. They are currently looking at whatever aspects of home rule law that they can, at zoning laws, at road use laws, to keep this process out of our community. I do know that there is already interest on the New Hartford Town Board in forming an alliance with the Town of Kirkland's board and the Town of Paris's board, so that down the road, if there needs to be strength from that alliance, it's there. I would urge this board to go beyond the moratorium and to do what our friends in Otsego County have done, which is everything they can using home rule and zoning laws. Thank you.
Let me ask a simple question here before we go any further. Does anybody want us not to put a moratorium in? Because it seems like we're getting, which I'm kind of happy with, but it seems like everybody's against it. Is there anybody that doesn't want us to put the moratorium in? Before I let anybody else speak.
I would like a ban.
We got to walk before we can run. You know, I mean, I think we start with the moratorium, and I think it's a healthy environment. I know, Bill, I know Chad Davis had asked Bill Thixton to read something for him.
You want me to do that?
Yes, please do.
And I'm going to read a letter from Chad Davis, our county legislator who couldn't be here tonight. He has a session of the board. Dear Supervisor Mealand and honorable town board members, in connection with the town board's consideration of a town-wide 1-year ban on hydrofracking, I'd like to briefly address how gas drilling may negatively impact real property values and mortgage lending. My perspective comes in part from a land title insurance standpoint, as I have worked in this business since 1983. As a backdrop, I'd like first to mention a word of art in the real estate industry known as marketable title. The concept of title of marketability or marketable title in simple terms relates to the ability or inability of a title holder to favorably convert home ownership in real property into money or liquid cash. A good and marketable title is typically free from reasonable suspicion or possible doubt. That is, the title should be of such sound and good quality that a willing purchaser will readily accept it and pay fair and valuable consideration for it at a good market rate. That said, some very troubling conditions, circumstances, and unknowns are now appearing on the horizon relative to the newly proposed widespread deployment of horizontal hydrofracking, which may serve to threaten the good and marketable titles within the town of Kirkland as well as other portions of southern Oneida County and the southern tier of New York. So here are his bullet points. Many banks, we've already heard this mentioned, and commercial lenders have recently put in place new business practices in which mortgage applications will be denied if the subject real property has gas wells on it or if the adjacent properties have gas wells on them. And Chad has provided a list of 11 banks which currently won't make loans to properties that have been hydrofracked or that are adjacent to properties that have been hydrofracked. Just a few names you will have heard of: Wells Fargo, Bank of America, First Liberty, FHA, and in central New York, M&T and First Niagara are both on that list.
Also MBT.
MBT now? Okay.
For the board, I have that here. Chad gave us a copy.
Yes, we have. And he's provided a copy here too. Obviously, he says, if such a class of real property is now going to be targeted by the banks and others lenders, how marketable, I ask, is the title? The straight up answer is that it is not very marketable, because very few people purchase real property with cash these days, and even if cash is used. Would anyone want to box themselves in by purchasing property that could not be sold to a subsequent proposed purchaser? I'm going to just summarize his next paragraph, which is about a letter from the Vice President of Tompkins Trust Company. The FHA has developed certain standards that make lending difficult in hydrofracking areas. The fact that a certain commonly used title insurance endorsement, known as comprehensive endorsement, required by many lenders, will not insure over or against the negative impacts of commercial gas drilling. That is, the title insurance endorsement is rendered void if the premises are used for any commercial gas venture. And third, the fact that presently there's no cost-effective or reliable way for a real estate appraiser to discover whether or not a certain piece of property has a gas lease on it or near, which may therefore impact all of our properties in the sense that they then become suspect. So that's pretty much what Chad has to say in his letter. He quotes a fellow named Walter Hang, who says natural gas leasing could have staggering implications for New York's lenders, homeowners, and real estate investors, given the potential scope of horizontal hydrofracking in our Marcellus Shale Formation. Current lending policies and practices can preclude existing potential homeowners and property investors from purchasing or selling real estate with gas leases due to the inability to obtain mortgage loans. So Chad urges the passage of the proposed moratorium, and he calls attention to the fact that the draft of the Marcellus Shale Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Statement will be woefully inadequate, as it's going to fail to consider these issues just an environmental statement. So it doesn't talk to property issues, to title issues, to mortgage issues. So I'd just like to say a couple of words of my own. As I've said since the beginning of this process, I think this is a completely nonpartisan issue. I don't think it's Republican or a Democratic or an independent issue. I think it affects all of us. It affects you, whatever your party or political interest, to have good water, to have reliable water, to have a safe environment in the town. And I urge us to think about this as we thought about the fight against the Nairi power line as something that's going to require a bipartisan coalition of all the towns, all the elected officials, and all the citizens of the area. I think this is a much more dangerous threat than the Nairi power line ever was, and that we need to all come together in the same way that we did on that issue. Thanks.
What I'm about to share with you is, from my heart to yours, is quite significant, because I have information which I can share with you which will speak to this from a scientific point of view. I'm not an emotional man, I'm a man of science, so I prefer to share with you scientific facts as opposed to discussing aspects of mortgage value. All of those things are valuable. Independently, they're extremely valuable. But I need to share with you what I'm about to do with a preface, and that's this. We've sold our house, we're leaving the community, but I feel this is an imperative issue that you will have to battle with long after our departure. And since I'm here, I want to share this with you for the benefit of those who are going to be staying behind and who are going to have to address it. And always the tough nut to crack is, how do you legislate with good scientific information in hand to prevent public health disasters from happening, and specifically to the benefit of the people who you've been elected to represent. And this is a very difficult thing from a scientific point of view, speaking and balancing economic effects with health effects. I'm the prime author of the National Academy of Science report, which adjoins 25 national scientific organizations looking at American healthcare systems and reporting that to the President of the United States. And as a consequence of that investigation, one of the things that we talk about is water. How specifically are water conditions here in the United States, how specifically EPA is doing its job in regulating quality of water. There are over 80,000 chemicals in the environment which we are routinely exposed to, which EPA does not test. So when we get our water quality report each year, there are tens of thousands of components, chemical components that we use in industrial processes and regular processes that never show up in any of the tested reports. So people need to be concerned about the quality of water anyway, in general. But above and beyond that, with respect to hydrofracking, what we need to be concerned about is what industry specifically doesn't tell us about what they're injecting into wells, and how specifically cross-contamination of water sources, groundwater, surface waters, and tributaries and streams are all affected. Not to mention the geology of the environment is affected as a consequence of hydrofracking. There are tens of thousands of issues that we can talk about, particularly that affect public health. And so I'm just going to share with you from the perspective of public health. It is a hazardous venture to look at hydrofracking without the substantiated science supporting legislation. So I speak in favor of a moratorium only to the extent that we don't have a bulletproof evidentiary detail that tell us that public health is completely protected when hydrofracking occurs. And environmental damages are not reversible. Are reversible, I should say. So, an industry will not provide us with any sources. And as a man of science, you always look to the evidence, and the evidence is still not there. What is eminently available is a case study like, for example, I'll point you to Rifle, Colorado as a very good example. A significant portion of the town had to be moved because of rapidly declining health effects of people whose properties and water, water have been contaminated due to hydrofracking. That's a very solid case. And then you've got anthropogenic effects following man-made effects, following secondary and tertiary effects on the environment. So I can take 3 hours to explain to you. I'd say to you that if you wish to have further details on this, please contact me, but I'd be happy to give you information. I'm at least prime author on 3 national papers on water quality in the United States, how it affects United States healthcare in general, and particularly looking at qualities like hydrofracking and other introduction of petrochemical compounds into the atmosphere. There is tons of information out there, and I hope you will get your hands on them, and hope to benefit this community in terms of your long-standing efforts to legislate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been a registered nurse for 45 years, 26 of those years in the Clinton Middle School. I'd like to just talk briefly about an area of hydrofracking concern that isn't spoken about as much, and that's air quality and the effects of air pollution on public health, and specifically the health of children. Air pollution caused by hydrofracking-related activities has the potential to affect the health of everyone, but children are a particular risk because they are exposed to more pollution per unit of body weight than adults. They breathe more rapidly than adults. Therefore, they increase their exposure to air pollution. Dr. Theo Coburn is a noted researcher and environmental analyst who, if you read reports, read articles, see the films that deal with hydrofracking, her name comes up frequently. She says that air and water are the most likely pathways of exposure to hydrofracking chemicals, and that air is the most immediate pathway. Exposure to volatile compounds can cause a wide range of symptoms, from mild to severe, from nosebleeds to dizziness, to brain and nervous system lesions and disorders, from acute to slow developing illnesses. At each stage of the production and delivery of toxic volatile compounds, including VETX, other hydrocarbons, and fugitive natural gas, which is methane, can escape and mix with nitrogen oxides from the exhaust of diesel-fueled mobile and stationary equipment to produce ground-level ozone. All you need is one reactive molecule of ozone to burn the deep alveolar tissue in the lungs, causing it to age prematurely. Chronic exposure can lead to asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, and is particularly damaging to children and young active adults who spend time outdoors, and also the aged. Anyone who has dealt with numbers of children as I have in school has seen the increasing incidence of asthma in our young population, and this is an enormous concern. Ozone from gas drilling, somebody else had mentioned an area in Colorado that had ozone levels similar to Los Angeles. That's occurred other places in the country. Sublet Wyoming, heavily hydrofracked, low population density, worse air quality than Los Angeles. And this ozone can spread hundreds of miles from its source. I've read several citations of up to 200 miles away. If you're wondering what generates these toxic emissions, consider the equipment and procedures that are part of the hydrofracking operation. Some have been mentioned. They include construction equipment, water supply and wastewater trucks, gas compressor stations that run 24/7 for the life of the well, generators, pumps, condensers, holding tanks, evaporation pits, flare-offs and venting, leaks, and accidental spills. Here in New York State, the American Academy of Pediatrics, who represents 6,000 pediatricians and the millions of children that they care for, the medical staff of Bassett Healthcare Network, and the pediatricians who specialize in environmental medicine at the Center for Children's Environmental Health at Mount Sinai School of Medicine have all stated their firm opposition to hydraulic fracturing happening in our state because of the multiple known health effects to children and others. Dr. Eric London is a New York physician and researcher who has written both to our Department of Health, the EPA, and he has stated that all levels of government and policymakers are shockingly complacent, not our board, but others, in their regulation and study of these air pollution issues. Were the health of so many people being affected by an infectious disease, a national emergency would be declared. And to that I say, amen. I do urge the board, I echo other people, I urge the board not only to pass the moratorium, but then to move on to study this issue in every way that you can, to move on to put a ban in place to prohibit any hydrofracking activity, to work with neighboring towns, and also to work with our legislative and state representatives in continuing efforts to have a ban put in place in this state. Thanks.
I'm a natural resources professional. By training, I went to ESF. I would hope that they would take a large role in helping us figure out what it is we have to do about this dilemma we face, this challenge we face. It's very clear from the sentiment in this room that the board will probably pass a moratorium and hip hooray. I feel that's the right thing to do. But what else do we need to do? We need to insist with our elected representatives, in following up what Mona was saying, that the state ensures that we do a proper strategic environmental assessment of what's, there's been some question about what kind of depth and what sort of detail will they look at the cumulative effects. What you're talking about is something that we deal with in the environmental sector, the cumulative effects, the strategic effects of these things. The companies will be able to prove that an individual well may not have an effect, or they may be able to prove to you that one by one they know how to manage or mitigate these environmental impacts. But we need to look at it from the larger socio and environmental health aspects that are likely to be the results. So I urge you all to urge your representatives at all levels of state government to insist that the Department of Environmental Conservation has the resources and that we hold them to a very high standard of due diligence in terms of performing the environmental assessment of this proposed practice. Thank you very much.
Here, just a few excerpts from people in Pennsylvania who had experience with fracking. It was reported by a woman and her husband who were very concerned when all their neighbors seemed to be signing up with the gas company, so they went and talked with people in Pennsylvania. Now, no amount of money can buy you sufficient sleep, said one farmer. It's bright, it's loud all the time. Not that I'd sleep anyway. All I do is worry about the land and the water and what we're going to do. And another complained that the gas companies do not respect the land, and in many documented cases tore out mature stands of trees. Tree lovers here appreciate this. 20, 30, 60, 80-year-old trees, leaving the tree carcasses scattered around the land. These guys just don't care, one landowner told them. And another reported the gas companies do pretty much as they please. There's no consultation with the landowner about placement or size of the pads, or the numerous roads that have to be cut into the property, or drainage fields, or pond sites, or planned building sites. And the gas drillers have access to leased land 24/7, 365 days a year, because there's always something to deal with on a gas pad. Now, another problem you might not think about, tension between the neighbors, those who signed a lease and are sticking with it, and those who did not sign and will never sign. And one owner in a long row around a rural road in Tioga County has been threatened and shunned by neighbors because his holding out caused gas companies to build their pipeline around his and the neighbor's land, and this meant the neighbors couldn't collect any royalty fees from the gas companies. Tension within families is another problem. A Pennsylvania man, the father of 2 children, said, "My whole family is ready to commit me. It's gotten so I don't trust anyone anymore. Those gas companies lie, the DEP lies, the state lies, everyone lies. I used to be a trusting kind of person, but not anymore. I'm so tense, and I never sleep. This place was our dream, and now it's just about worthless. It's eating me up, and my wife is losing patience with me. I don't blame her. All I can do is fight to make sure this doesn't happen to other families. Otherwise, I couldn't live with myself." So.
Thank you.
From the town of Kirkland, and I wanted to reiterate what many people said here about the necessity of towns working with each other on this issue. This problem knows no town boundaries, as has been mentioned before, and unless there's cooperation between towns, the actions of any particular town will be relatively ineffective, if not meaningless. I wanted to talk about a couple of other loose ends or points that I noted maybe weren't yet brought up. One is that of methane migration. And methane migration is one of the more proven problems that has happened in Pennsylvania and out west. And there was recently a study done by Duke University in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, on 65 wells that were within 1 mile of where fracking was taking place. They found of the 65 wells, 85% had highly elevated levels of methane. Some of the wells were at such high levels that the houses into which this water were going were in danger of explosion, as were the wells. This is the phenomenon where you turn on your faucet and you can light your water on fire. But it doesn't really just end there, because we know that methane can also carry with it other gases which are quite poisonous to you. So it's not as if someone says, well, you're not going to drink methane, or if you drink it, you're not going to swallow it, it won't hurt anything. There's very little apparently known about the effect of methane in your water and drinking it as it is. But in addition to that, you don't just drink water. You wash dishes with it, you wash clothes with it, you bathe in it, and it gets mixed with other chemicals. Your methane mist and water gets mixed with bleach, it gets mixed with all sorts of things. And the effects of these things have not been studied, but I can't imagine that they're particularly healthy. What happens, so 85% of these properties had their water ruined permanently. When this happens, people try to dig other wells, and they find that the whole underground structure has been affected by methane migration. So there is no good water. So of course the value of the property is just about nil when that happens. The health of the inhabitants, if they have to stay there, if they're not independently wealthy and can't decide to just abandon the property and leave, is in serious jeopardy. And often people then try to get the gas company that's drilling nearby to supply them with water. That is apparently a battle that can take months, because there are sometimes many companies drilling nearby, and no one can prove whose fracking caused somebody a mile away to get methane migration. Once that happens and you try to battle with a company, if the company does supply water, apparently sometimes the water deliveries drop off. It's been said that in Bradford County, there are, dotting the landscape, numerous and sort of well-known water tanks that they call water buffaloes that sit on people's lawns. And this is a common sight. All those houses that have them have had their water ruined. Why there's not more in the press about this, I truly do not understand. But that study, which showed 85%, should have us extremely worried, especially if you have a well, or if, as in my case in the Deansboro Water District, which is right inside the town of Marshall, our water comes from a spring, which is essentially a well. What happens to the entire water system? That was one issue I wanted to bring up, which is a real and present danger. The injecting into our aquifer, and from what I have read, a geologist might be able to have more information on this. We live in something called an unconsolidated aquifer, which is not, we don't have thick bedrock that goes down thousands of feet. We have a combination of rock and gravel and freshwater pockets. And those aquifers produce very good farmland, which we have. But they also are known to be very sensitive to pollution from groundwater on down. So spills and other things, our aquifer is more like a sponge. I've been working in the town of Marshall for the last 2 years on our comprehensive plan, and having researched our water before any of this came up, I got to read a water study, a professional water study that was done, which mentioned that we live on a sensitive aquifer. It's the same aquifer that covers the town of Kirkland and this whole area. I shouldn't say covers, it's under our feet. And that's why we have such good water right now. In any case, the attention that would normally be paid to a sensitive aquifer, and that would be something we would write in a comprehensive plan, it's a typical thing that's mentioned, is going to be completely ignored by people who come in and try to foist this process on our area. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the issue of the Halliburton loophole, which is that as it stands now, aside from hydrofracking being exempt from the Clean Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Air Act, a loophole was also obtained that said that trucks which truck out so-called produced water, which is the water that has the fracking chemicals that have already been used, in addition to the water that was brought up. So this is the water that's already been injected in. 2/3 of it stays underground to only who knows what in the future, but 1/3 of it comes back up, and it now also has naturally occurring radioactive material in it. That chemical and radioactive water goes off in trucks, as we've talked about, and the Halliburton loophole says that those trucks don't have to be marked hazardous waste, nor do they have to be treated as hazardous waste at this point. It's absolutely an unbelievable phenomenon. And what that means is that should one of those trucks turn over in our area and spill, one, we have no idea what's in it, and two, we may not even know that it's hazardous. So we have first responders unprotected, not wearing hazmat suits. It's kind of unthinkable. So those are some of the dilemmas that we're faced with. Lastly, getting back to methane migration, it's been posited what happens to our local fire departments should methane migration occur in some of our smaller towns that get their water out of a system such as perhaps in Deansboro where it's a spring. If methane comes into the water, how do you put out water? When your water, how do you put out fires if your water is flammable?
One of the things that they do to woo us is to say, oh, it's going to create energy independence. Not true. As a matter of fact, there are no gas tanks or pipelines that are labeled for U.S. only. Natural gas and oil are world commodities, and they are traded on the world market as such. And we already export natural gas. We are not exporting the Marcellus natural gas yet, but we do export natural gas. And there are 58 locations in the United States where liquefied natural gas can be exported and imported. If a gas company can sell their product for 2 or 3 times
more to a foreign market, do you think that they're going to say, oh no, we can't sell to you, China, because this is for the United States. We're going to lose money, but that's okay. That's not the way it works. In fact, a spokesperson from Chesapeake Energy said, now, we look at investing in LNG, that's liquefied natural gas, export facilities, and we are studying that right now. We've got to figure out a way to get some linkage to the world market. We are dedicated to trying to find a way to achieve that linkage. We read the papers and see that gas around the world goes for twice what it goes for here, meaning the United States. So, my view is we make a widget here, and that widget is valued at X here, but 2X around the world. So, we are trying to figure out a way to get it on a boat and get it to some of the overseas markets. And there's a lot of evidence that ports down in Maryland are being refitted for export of Marcellus shale gas. And it just goes on and on. The companies, natural gas companies all over the world are buying shares of the natural gas. And if they buy enough shares of this, they can then convince them that they need to export it. So anyway, do not fall for that line.
I'm an emeritus professor of physics at Hamilton College. And I just wanted to speak very briefly about one thing that has been touched on perhaps, but from my point of view needs some more emphasis. And that is the radioactive materials that are involved in hydrofracking. Quite apart from the problems of this liquid that they put in to the Marcellus shale in order to get the fracturing to occur. They put it at high pressure. They have to pump that out, and that's the problem, what to do with it. They have to pump it out in order to get the gas released from the fractured Marcellus shale. Now, what's going to happen along with the natural gas coming out, mostly methane, but other gases as well, is that radon, a radioactive gas, will also be released from these same fractures. And radon is different from methane or any of these other gases in that it's a so-called noble gas. It doesn't easily make chemical reactions with other atoms or molecules. So it's there, it's released, it comes out with, let's say, the methane that gets into a gas line that's pumped to houses for whatever purpose, many purposes, as we know. And what has not been addressed is this will happen because of the gas that's released after the fracking process. It's going to be in the gas lines. It's going to have radon in it. You turn on the gas in your gas stove, you're going to get some radon. The radon is not going to ignite and burn away the way the methane does. It's going to remain as a radioactive gas which can be breathed into your lungs, and it's known that radon is the second most potent source of lung cancer in the United States. So you're going to be breathing in this stuff. It's known to be dangerous, and it's necessary, the way things are set up now, necessary concomitant to the fracturing process. It's going to be there. They don't intend, as far as I can tell, to get rid of it, or they don't advertise any or suggest any means, that is, the gas companies, do not, by which it might in fact be removed. It's not going to be easy to remove. It's going to be expensive to remove, and there's no suggested process for this to be accomplished. So obviously, extend your, make your moratorium, and think, as many people have said, about what can be done to keep this process clean and keep Oneida County, or Kirkland Township in this case, free of this menace, which is what I think it is.
Thank you.
And I'm just a cow chip toss south of the border, down from Skyline Drive. But as a graduate professor for some years, I've had several studies done by my graduate students, many from Radioactive County, Pennsylvania, and from Chemung County, and I've read these issues for a long time. But I think what's missing, the science, by the way, Professor Ring, unbelievable letter that you wrote and studied, and the science is phenomenal. And obviously it puts a scare in all of us. I think the elephant in the room here is the little guy versus the big guy. We are residents of a pristine area. And when this thing comes to the powers that be that are going to make the big decisions, it's going to be a bunch of rather expensively suited lawyers sitting in front of a Congress or a state legislator with all kinds of loopholes and preparation. And at that point, decisions will be made at either the federal government level or the state government level that will bear down upon us like a meteor landing on us. The concern I have is that, and we all know the stories, and I don't go back much further than maybe Little Abner and Corn Pone, and you know, knowing that big industry or whatever big entity has come into small towns, and you can't keep them out. No matter what you try to do, they build something. And so the grassroots nature is the little guy versus the big guy. And the elephant in the room is, what can we do? And we don't want to think for a second that local government is dead. And yet, that's our fear. Our fear is that you, Mr. Supervisor, would sometimes feel like your hands are tied. You know, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you know, and then we hear names like Halliburton and other prominent political figures and industrialists and bankers and everybody else. But it's the little guy who loses his life's work, the pristine environment. You know, the future wars of the world are not going to be over energy, as they have been for a while. They're going to be over water. And the United States needs to put its stake in the ground now. And this community needs to be part of that stake. We need to protect our water. We need to protect our land. You know, I own 23 acres, which is basically a hayfield, with a 65-mile view and a place for my dog to run. And when I come home from India, Sri Lanka, Christchurch, New Zealand, wherever it is I go with my work in emergency management, when I come home, I am really glad to come home. And I want home to be there for a long time. And we send our adults, our moms and dads, to work every day in very dangerous situations. Look at the coal mines. Look at BP. Go back to Exxon Valdez, Bhopal. I don't care where you want to go. We send mom and dad, that officer right there, the chief, wears a gun and goes to work every day in a dangerous situation. And we do this to pay the bills today, forgetting many times about the impact on our environment and on our children for years to come. You know, health impacts that are 20, 30 years out. It's time we started looking forward. It's time we put a stake in the ground and stop these people who are just interested in profit from coming in and ruining what's been here for 200 years. And whatever you can do to group with other towns, communities, listen to the legislator, you know, etc. Whatever you can do to build the strength of all these wonderful people. And by the way, we are incredibly endowed with knowledgeable people in this community. But whatever you can do to strengthen the voice of these people so that the little guy doesn't feel like he's being stepped on by the big guy, that's what this community needs. We need to know that our rights as little people, intelligent people, well-meaning people, are going to be protected. And so there's the elephant in the room. You know, take it where you can, but let the state and the county and everybody else you can know that the little people of this country are not going to be overridden.
I've had conversation with some state and county officials, and my take was always, I don't know if this is right to, yeah, it is right to say it. I always say it's like selling your soul to the devil. We're gonna have an economic boom, but we're gonna get rid of our
My studies in Radford and the students did in Radford and Shillong showed it's not an economic boom. It's not, the workers that come in are transient workers.
Right, but it's short.
Yeah.
It's short. But what I'm saying is that, you know, I don't want to take a chance, my personal opinion is take a chance with the aquifer, ruin the aquifer of the water for the village of Clinton, or? Yes, sir.
Can you tell me why there couldn't be a ban put in place and let others have a burden of proof to prove it's safe?
Why couldn't you have the moratorium is only going to give these companies more time, the big companies, corporations, more time to prepare their defense and their attack. Just like Walmart, you cannot defeat those people. They keep coming back and back like a hydra. And I don't know how many of you saw Divided Estates or Gasland. I don't know whether any of you have seen that.
Yes, I did. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
And I think, you know, this moratorium is a waste of time because we'll still be going over the same thing forever. You've got to ban it completely.
You can't just do a ban with the click of your finger, man. There's legal ways that you have to do this. The moratorium gives us the time to do the legal stuff. If we do it wrong, trust me, just putting a moratorium in place, just to put a moratorium in place, our attorney had to do some serious research, because if you do something just a little bit wrong, they can throw your moratorium away. And you're right, you're fighting the giant. So we were very fortunate when I asked Attorney Halleck to put this thing together. He researched it with some attorneys in Syracuse. We got some information from these folks here of attorneys that we had to look at. And I think more importantly is it gives us time to, if the board decides to do a ban, it gives us time to meet with these other attorneys and make sure, we could put this moratorium together. If we didn't do that right, they can walk in and beat us up right now. So we had to spend the time to do this, and we have to do the next set of research if we decide to do a ban.
Sir, what you're saying is absolutely the critical issue here, is we're not even sure it's legal to ban this. Banning this process, selecting out this one industry, probably will not hold up in court, all right? We need to, this idea of an alliance, I know right now the town board in New Hartford is very interested in working with you folks and the folks in Paris. They're up against the same problem. We need to use home rule, things that we are pretty sure will hold up in court. That's zoning laws, road use laws. That's all we have is home rule laws, things that you can do to protect. You have the power to protect our health and safety, and those are the tools you need to use.
I don't disagree with you at all.
Bob, I understand that, and I'll have to get the information for you, but in Albany, I understand that there is someone has put forward a law to be voted upon that would give the last say to home rule, to the various communities. I'll get that information for you.
I would just like to speak to that. First of all, you know, the town board has a lot cut out for it dealing with this topic. What Bob said is right. I mean, the right way to go about this is to put a moratorium in place, proceed, get all the legal information you need and put in place. You can even extend a ban, but when you put in a ban, there are environmental lawyers who are working with communities in New York State who are approaching it saying that you ban or prohibit heavy industrial uses. You do not ban hydrofracking. So there are ways to do it. Skinny Atlas put a moratorium in place last year in the summer. They renewed it for a second 6-month moratorium. Now they're working with an environmental law firm from Ithaca to enact a ban. There are many communities, mostly in the southern tier, who have been doing it. So I think we're on the right track. The law that you referenced, Bonnie, is the legislative session has ended. There were a multitude of hydrofracking-related bills, one that would have extended the moratorium for a year until next June, so that when the DEC comes out with the report, that there's time for the legislature to come back, for it to be properly reviewed. None of them were voted on. The Republican, I won't say that, because it wasn't across the board, but many legislators just left town. They weren't voted on. They didn't even come up in the Senate. The Assembly passed several of those bills. The Senate never touched them. So the board is going to be busy, and they can do what they can with the county and state representatives if they can contact them and put pressure on them from your perspective. But each one of us should be doing that. And we are so late to the game. As Gary has pointed out, for a long period of time in the OD, they have been advertising for fracking drivers. I mean, they have everything in place. Whenever this happens, if New York State allows permitting, once the procedure goes forward to that point, the gas company will be all over those leased areas. And if you see maps in New York State, around Skaneateles, in Portland, in Onondaga County, the leased areas are, it would knock your socks off just to look at a map and see how much area is leased. There are leases taken around here in the towns that surround us. So I would say every one of us needs to call our legislator who did not vote, who would not work to get these laws, bills even voted on in the Senate. We should contact everyone, and we should continue to do that all summer long, and hope that when they come back in session, that pressure will be growing so that this can be stopped. New York is in a special place that I think Maryland, maybe New Jersey is moving this way. In New York, we are the 3 states that maybe are saying, hopefully, wait a minute. And the power's with us, I think. We are the little people. But
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close the public hearing now, and what I'm going to say is any information that you people can get to us, and Mona, I know you and Bill have sent a ton of stuff to our office, and any information that can help us with our research, please send it to town.
My question is to you, and I'm concerned about it. I know that with the school, the state always can mandate that you have to do something, and we have to go along with it. Now, as far as home rule goes, and you being the supervisor, and we put in a moratorium, and say if we do eventually get to a ban, can the state come in and mandate that we do such?
That's an attorney question.
I know, but it's a concern of mine, because all of this, I agree with everything that's been said here.
Yeah, I think
but is it moot to the point that we go through all this stuff and now down the line the state comes in and says, well, you have to do this? Can they mandate that, or do we have this whole rule?
That I can't answer, but I wouldn't want to sit here and not take the chance. I think we need to move forward and hope.
I agree.
Hope to God that it doesn't happen. But
well, that's one of my concerns was,
When
are
will
we
we
going to be
know
able?
about the decision of the board on vis-a-vis the moratorium itself?
what's that?
When will we know
As
about?
soon as you let me close this public hearing. Honest to God, I swear to God. Like 30 seconds after, trust me. You didn't have your answer, sir.
Time extension of what the moratorium is going to be?
Yes, 1 year.
Mr. Miller, just a 10-second advertisement.
Go ahead.
There is a local organization called Hydro Relief Web. We're trying to organize at the county level, working with chapters in towns, because we feel that our second to the last line of defense is the town. The feds don't seem to be very much in favor of protecting us. The state isn't looking like, even though there's factions within the state government that are on our side, but as a whole, the state doesn't look like it's going to protect us. So our second to last line is the town. And the very last line, I suppose, would be some type of nonviolent civil disobedience, a Cairo type thing happening in Albany. But we're hoping that that the towns get together and follow suit with what they're doing here in New Hartford and Kirkland. So if you'd like to sign for information, you can let us know whether you'd like to be a little bit more active in a chapter type thing. Mona can give us the information on what's happening here in Kirkland. And also there's going to be a bus tour of Gasland. It'll be going down to Tawana, Pennsylvania on the 16th of January. Right now we don't have enough people for the bus. Of July, I'm sorry. Our payroll this morning said January, so so anyway, so yeah, 16th of January, and whatever month it's going to be next month. And so if we don't have enough for a bus, we will go down and carpool. So again, here's some papers, and thank you for my 10-second advertisement that went a minute.
All right, at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion to close the hearing?
I'll make the motion.